Recording.
And just to let everyone know, since we already pressed it, we will be recording this just because a few people couldn't make it, so we can make it available to them. If you're, don't want to be seen, you can feel free to obviously turn your camera off if you're fine with it. You have your camera on, but just to let you know it is being recorded, just so students that weren't able to make it can view it later.
Yep. Okay. All right, welcome everyone. Great to see a really healthy group of people here. Jeremy and I are excited to do this little presentation for you on networking. The title is Growing, Maintaining, Leveraging Your Professional Network. The goal of this is to kind of empower you to spend this summer growing your network, maintaining it, and then in the fall or the spring, when you're ready to either apply for full-time roles or internships, to leverage that network, and that's the key piece. So we're going to show you a few slides on each of these stages. I'll kind of do some of the intro. Jeremy will take over in the middle, and then I'll finish off the slides. This is interactive, so you had a chance to choose which country you're from. There will be more opportunities throughout the session for you to interact using the same codes. Jeremy, I wonder if you could drop the website into the chat again. You can respond using your phone, or you can open up a tab on your laptop. Cool. Thanks, Jeremy. We want this to be interactive also with questions. So please, if you have questions about networking, put them into the chat, and we will have some time at the end to answer those. So this is a great time for you to really kind of ask questions. If you heard any rumors about networking, this is the opportunity to get them confirmed or denied. So really, don't be shy with your questions. We also encourage you to come off camera, come off your camera or come off mute to answer questions to ask questions. Sorry. Okay. So just to introduce myself, my name is Mike Harris. I'm the Assistant Director for Engineering and Physical Sciences at the Career Center. So I support mostly students from those majors with any career advice. And then, Jeremy, do you want to introduce yourself quickly?
Sure. Yeah, my name is Jeremy. My pronouns are he and him, and I'm an Assistant Director for LNS, and I work primarily with students in the humanities and social sciences.
Yep. Okay. All right, I see someone said in the chat that the poll has received the maximum number of responses. I think that's because there was a cap on how many I can do. Not sure what that cap is, but we know there is a cap. So it's okay though. If you respond and if you don't have a chance to, it's okay. But I do encourage you to respond in the upcoming opportunities. One is actually going to come up pretty soon. All right, let me move along the slide. Okay, this is the first one. So again, use that address to indicate, but how confident do you feel using networking or as a job or internship application tool? I want to get a sense from the audience where you feel. Okay, across the board, no one's super confident, but I guess if you were, then you wouldn't be here. Okay. All right, so where we would expect to see it, I think a grouping in the middle. Obviously, there are some who don't feel confident at all, and then, like I said, if you were the bright green face, you might not be spending your hour with us, and that's okay. I think networking is something that it can be an intimidating thing to do, but like many other things, it's a skill. So the more you do it, the better you get at it. And the goal of this session is to kind of give you some tools so that you can be better at it. All right. Some of our workshop goals is we're going to talk about the importance of networking. Well, Jeremy's going to talk about the importance of networking, how to grow the network, and then I'll talk about the maintaining and leveraging your network. Okay. Jeremy, do you want to take over? Or do you want me just to keep presenting?
I can take over. Yeah, I can check.
Yeah, stop screen sharing.
Sweet. And welcome everyone. If you're just joining us, the session is being recorded, just to let you know. I'm going to go ahead and get started with the importance and growing your network, and then Mike's gonna wrap up after that.
It's a Career Center thing about networking.
Alex, just to let you know, you're unmuted.
Sorry.
Yo, you're good. Mike, can you see my screen? Okay, cool.
Yeah, you're good.
Sweet. All right. So does networking actually work? So we're going to go ahead and start. But just yes, if you approach it correctly. I like to emphasize that it's about quality, not necessarily quantity. Sometimes when people think of networking, they think they need to rush out, right, and like meet or talk to a ton of people. And what typically is more effective is just starting to identify what are the spaces that you're interested in terms of career fields, and then identifying who are people that have knowledge or access to those fields and kind of getting in touch with them. And we'll talk about kind of how to move through this strategically, but I want you to keep that in mind. It doesn't necessarily mean you have to, but it's always good to practice these skills. But it could just be like being more aware when you're in spaces where you're actually interested in that type of work, or maybe types of people come through your life that you're like, wow, what you do is super cool. Being more aware this might be a moment where you're going to use some of these networking skills. In regards to this slide, obviously, you can read it and we'll make the slides available at the end. The point is, especially now, it's a little harder sometimes to build connection, right, virtually, but it's really important to be reaching out to folks and really learning about their company and the things they do, because referrals are really important. That familiarity piece is really important. So we'll kind of break down how to do this. But recruiters and companies really do value already having some sort of interaction or impression of you prior to applying. So that will go a long way. Just kind of a basic human concept, right? If familiarity tends to be a good thing, the more familiar we are with things, we tend to have a better impression of it. Okay. So places to use networking skills, there's obviously a lot. It'll be interesting, right? As things come back to on campus during fall, there will be different opportunities in person. Right now over summer, I'm assuming most likely most of your opportunities are going to be virtual. You can obviously read the different ones on this slide, but just to kind of highlight some of the things, and I'll point them out later. We do a lot of events through the Career Center, like career connections events and networking events, which I'll highlight. So we make this process a little easier for you, bringing alumni and people to campus that might work in these spaces that I mentioned that you're interested in. But you also just having access to Berkeley's campus, right? Or just through your own life, have access to lots of spaces where you can practice these skills. So know that this doesn't necessarily have to be just in terms of like a workplace setting. This could be in a lot of different settings and campus, kind of in your personal life, a lot of different places to practice these different skills. And so one thing in terms of the importance, I like to think of, people kind of do networking, for lack of a better word, and we'll try to break that down into more of like an informational interview, career conversation, so it seems a little less daunting in a second. But people approach this for different reasons, right? Some of you may be where you're like, I need to get a job right now. Some of you may be like, I just want to learn more information about a certain career field. Maybe some of you aren't like hard pressed for like an opportunity right now, but in the future you will be looking, so you want to gain information. So everyone's going to be at a different spot in the spectrum in terms of how you're approaching networking. So here are just a few questions to get you thinking about what is your approach, or what are you trying to hoping to gain basically from networking with other people. So what I like to think of is, how well do you know what your future direction is, kind of that career field? You don't have to have everything figured out, but you probably do want to start narrowing down a bit. So different career fields that you might be interested in. I'll throw in the chat a career fields link so you can start to see some of the ones I'm talking about. So I'll throw that in one sec. Or Mike, if you want to throw in the career fields page on our website, just to help thinking of how to sort. The other thing is what sort of areas are you trying to grow in professionally? So do you just want to gain more exposure to a certain area? Are there certain skills that you're working on? Maybe you're interested in going to grad school and you're wanting to build some research skills. Or maybe you're interested in political organizing, and so you want to do some work like with the labor center on campus, or some organizing work. So starting to identify what are those things you're trying to build. So how well do I know the career fields? What are those? What skills am I trying to build? So by the time I graduate, or a little after graduation, I kind of have this skill set. Thank you, Mike, for dropping that. And then are there any organizations that you're interested in, and starting to key in on that, right? Maybe there's certain companies that you'd like to get in touch with and maybe talk to some people and learn more about it. So these will just kind of help you start figuring out what are your goals for networking. Is it just more of this overarching, I just want to learn more about this field? Or is it like, no, I want to work for X company doing this role and I just need to get in touch with someone? So just kind of take stock of what those goals are and how it can benefit you. All right. In terms of actually, this is the growing part of the finding people. So right on importance, it is important. One thing I didn't mention is hiring practices are changing a lot, especially in the virtual environment, and constantly changing with companies in terms of how they're looking for people. So it's even more important to kind of be talking to people in those fields and companies and asking them, right? How do you go about hiring? How can I stand out? What are like certain websites I should use? What are things I should be saying? So even more important, I'd even mention that aspect. But again, the importance we really hit on, right? Companies do value having that familiarity with you. And also another reason it's important, right? It's going to give you exposure and help you learn about these different fields and figure out if they're right for you as well. In terms of this growing part, I always say start with people you know. You don't have to start immediately just like adding a bunch of people on LinkedIn. You may get to that point eventually, but let's reel it back in. We're always going to start with who do you have within your immediate network. So that's kind of that first stage. Kind of think of it as degrees of separation. So first we have people in our immediate network. It's probably our friends, our family, maybe classmates, professors, people you're running across maybe on a daily, weekly, like monthly basis. So that's always good to start. And then we haven't got to the approach yet, but just thinking about people that we can approach specifically to kind of learn more about maybe a career field or learn more about opportunities. So when you're thinking through people in your immediate network, you're thinking through, hey, is there anyone I already know that may do something that I'm interested in for work, that maybe has done an opportunity like an internship or research or something that I'd be interested in? So we're thinking pretty loosely right now. Secondly, if you feel like you start to exhaust that, I usually start to think of what types of communities you have access to. Obviously, you have a very robust Berkeley community that you have a lot of resources with. Oftentimes people get overwhelmed by the resources at Berkeley. And it's really like, how do I pick the best ones or ones that fit me? We obviously fall under this rung for you. Mike and I, working at the Career Center, are part of your Berkeley community. I joke with students that like, we're not friends, but I'm paid to help you. So this is still low-hanging fruit. You can reach out to me. I'll help you. Same thing with Mike. So you have access to the Career Center. And like I said, in the chat, I can link some of our programs and things. We do already have our career fairs listed in Handshake that you can start looking at. Those are opportunities. I mentioned some of those Career Connection series, but we do provide a robust series of programming. You can also meet with a career counselor one-on-one to talk about your specific networking strategy. And a lot of the counselors have actually good connections with alumni and other folks like on campus and employers. So if you're interested in engineering and physical sciences, you can meet with Mike and he can help plug you into different networks. If you meet with me, if you're interested in more public service, social impact, I can get you plugged in. So know that that's just one area of your communities, right? The Career Center. There's also campus is really robust. There's lots of centers and places on campus that you can tap into based on your interest, whether it's a student org, something like the Public Service Center, something like the startup community at Berkeley, like the law school, right? There's lots of things you can kind of tap into. So right now we're just thinking strategically about like, who can I network with? And then thirdly, if you feel like you've exhausted this, maybe your communities, I mentioned Berkeley, this could also though be right, like your faith community, your back home community, like the Berkeley, Oakland area. So you don't have to think it's just constrained to one. But then we have our social networks. And so within that, this is things like typically like LinkedIn. There's something called Berkeley Career Network, which I'll touch on really briefly in terms of that. But this is starting to reach out to people, another degree of separation, our media network, communities, maybe just people. It's kind of online that are slightly removed from you, but usually you still have something in common, right? Because as I mentioned, familiarity is good. So maybe it's other alumni, right, from Berkeley. Maybe it's people that aren't alum, but they work in the area and work in a space you're interested in. So you still have something in common. So we're still trying to find typically people through these more social networks or online that you have something in common with to kind of network with. So that's more of just the approach in terms of who can you network with. I'm just going to wrap up really briefly with how this actually looks of reaching out in terms of growing it with. How does that look? And then Mike will kind of take over the maintaining and leveraging your network. So we like to use this model in terms of networking as a career conversations model. On our website, we have this strategy listed as informational interviewing. So a lot of you probably heard it by different names: coffee chats, career conversations, informational interviewing. But the point is typically that you're reaching out to someone in that space, basically to learn more about it, see if it's a good fit for you, see if there's available opportunities. And people like sharing their story and giving advice. So usually it's reaching out to people and asking for them to share their story and provide advice. So I'm going to go ahead and just kind of wrap up by hitting on this slide and then showing a couple of things online. But basically, when you think of framing this, typically think of this as a conversational, typically with a professional in a space that you're interested in. It's an opportunity, right, to learn more. And really, you're just trying to ascertain information. If you're specifically looking for a job, maybe it's like, okay, I don't want to just learn about the career field. I know I want to work here and I'm applying there. It's still a similar strategy. You're just going to be a little bit more direct. So instead of maybe reaching out and be like, hey, I'd love to learn more, I'd love to talk to you, I'd be like, hey, I'd love to work for your company. I really like the work they do. Do you have any advice on in terms of like how to apply and what has your experience been there? So it's a similar framework. So let's go ahead and kind of touch on this framework. So I'm going to go ahead and stop share real quick. And I will pull up this slide. All right, I'm going to throw this into the chat. And thank you, Mike, for responding to stuff in the chat. I know I may have missed some stuff, but this is a good resource. This is kind of our informational interviewing resources. Mike, can you see that on your screen? Okay, cool. So within this goes through kind of, how to find people, how to sample message of how to reach out, that sort of thing. I want to highlight there are 2 hyperlinks on here that are helpful, and I'll go ahead and throw this in the chat in 1 second too. So come off, but there's something called Berkeley Career Network, which is a nice resource of alumni that have opted into wanting to work with students and recent alum. And from there, you can click into it and find people with a similar major or career field that are willing to work with you and talk to you about navigating that space. We also have linked to the See Alumni feature on LinkedIn, where you can look through other Berkeley alum and kind of see what they did. And that's another opportunity for you to connect with them. And I'll go ahead and throw this. I have these different links up here. And as well, here's even a thing we have on how do you do that, right? How do I connect with on LinkedIn and kind of add a note? So here's like a sample message, and I'll throw this in the chat as well, of how you can potentially add someone on LinkedIn. Again, overall, this message, I keep it simple. I usually point out what it is that we might have in common, or the kind of ask of, hey, you work at this company, I'm really interested in the work you do at X company, or like, hey, you're a Berkeley alumni, I'm actually a currently Berkeley student in that. So I like to find common ground. Then I usually like to ask for their story and advice. Hey, I'd love to hear your experience working in that industry. If you have any advice for me as I'm looking to get a job there, or as I'm looking to build experience, thank you so much. And then maybe give them an option of how you could connect, like maybe like over Zoom, email, or phone or something. If you're free for, 15 to 20 minutes over X, Y, or Z, I really appreciate it. Please let me know. So that's kind of a sample. Again, it might just be more direct if you're actually trying to get a job there versus just discovering. But those are kind of the 3 things. And I'll put that in the chat too. I usually do, where kind of build connection, kind of ask for their story and advice, and then give them options in terms of how they'd like to connect. So these are 2 good resources I'll throw in the chat. Here's the See Alumni feature on LinkedIn. I'll go ahead and throw that in the chat because I'm about to pass it over to Mike. And the last thing I wanted to show you all is another thing you can do. I mentioned, right, LinkedIn you can use. I mentioned Berkeley Career Network. If a lot of you are on Handshake, you probably are on Handshake if you're accessing this event. So I know you've at least logged in. Another cool thing you can do on Handshake is on your student view. If you go to your homepage and then click on employers, a lot of times you can look up employers and they actually have a contact person for their company. They don't always, but they sometimes do on a public staff list. And that's another opportunity for you to reach out to someone. So say you're interested in like accounting, consulting or something, and you're like, okay, I'm interested in a role at EY. So I could look up EY under the employers tab, and in the bottom right, they typically have a contact information and a public staff list of people that you can reach out to. So another example, this is a little more directed, right? But say you're trying to grow your network and you have specific organizations or companies in mind, recommend you can always try looking on Handshake, see if they have someone listed for kind of people within Handshakes like you, college students, to reach out to. So that's kind of another tool there. So I'm going to go ahead and end it there. I'm going to throw those links I talked about in the chat. I'm going to go ahead and pass it over to Mike. If you have any specific questions, again, feel free to throw them in the chat and we'll get to them towards the end.
All right, thanks, Jeremy. Okay. Jeremy, can you see my screen?
Yes, sir.
Is it the maintaining a professional network slide?
Yes, sir. Yep.
Okay. All right, so good information there. Something to point out that when Jeremy was talking about career conversations or informational interviews, they're a way to build your network, but they're also a way to maintain your network. So while you're having these conversations to get to know people, they're also a key way to keep that network going. So one of the things I want to talk about is maintaining your professional network. So once you've done all these things and you're starting to grow your network, at the same time you should be maintaining it. Now these are not finish line, start line kinds of things. You don't grow it and then stop and then maintain it. I think you're always growing your network. As you're growing it though, you also need to be maintaining what you've grown. So don't think of these things as separate. They're happening at the same time. And by maintaining, we mean, keeping engaged, keeping that network active, because when you get to that stage of wanting to leverage your network, it's going to be a lot, you're going to be more successful if you're making an ask when you've had some kind of engagement with that person. If you're just coming out of the blue to make an ask, you might be successful, but people are more willing to help you out or to be a resource if maybe it's on the back of some kind of engagement. And we'll talk about what that engagement can be. Okay, so important things to think about when you're maintaining your professional network is be strategic. Now, you'll see people's LinkedIn connections. They are connected to over 500 people. LinkedIn stops counting once you get to 500. So some people are in the thousands. Can you maintain a network of over 500 people? Probably not. So you really have to be strategic to think about who are the people that I really want to stay in contact with. Who are the key people in the roles or the key companies that I really want to make sure that I'm prioritizing. And that's really what you got to do, is prioritize. That list will change as you go. So for you, the students, as you're thinking about your internships for next summer, or if you're thinking about that first job, what are the companies you're really excited about? What are the roles you're really excited about? And then see who in your network has those roles and works at those companies. And those are the people that you really want to focus on. Not to say you're forgetting about everyone else, but we're essentially just deprioritizing them. Second thing to keep in mind is, what is the medium you want to use to stay in contact with them? Some people like to stay in contact in different ways. Some people are talkers. They love to get on a phone and talk to you, or maybe on a video call. Other people, maybe they prefer text, or they prefer maybe a direct message. Other people, maybe, if they're kind of, their main way of wanting to be contacted is just through a like a social media post, or a tag or a mention. So you really have to play these different ways, these different communication mediums. Try learn what people prefer. So for example, if you're reaching out to somebody and you want to do a career conversation, give them different opportunities how they want to engage. Hey, would you like to do a video call or a phone call, or maybe we could email? Give them different options so that people then can select one that feels comfortable for them. If you force them onto a video call and they don't really want to do that, it's not gonna go that well. It's gonna kind of leave a bitter taste in their mouth that they're like kind of forced to kind of spend 30 minutes on a call with you, and they prefer just to do maybe an email exchange. So give people different options when you're reaching out to them. And then the one that's really important is be real and authentic. When you are making connections with people, you don't have to adopt any false sentiments. You don't have to be someone you're not in order to connect to somebody. So it's very important to be authentic. People can, I think people who know, especially people who know you, they know when you're not being authentic, or they can sense when it's a little bit corny, or it's manipulative. So it's important that you're just, you're being authentic. So when you see something on LinkedIn that somebody in your network has posted and you really do like it, then like it, and or put a comment to say, this is great, thank you for posting. I think it's important that you're being true when you're reaching out to people, because people will see that, and I think it goes a long way. So when it comes to maintaining your professional network, what are some examples? Social media. Now, this comes with a caveat. You have to be careful and strategic when you're using social media to connect with your network. Social media, the important word there is social, which is different to professional, but it is still a tool that you can use. So if you do follow somebody on Instagram or on Twitter, or if you're friends on Facebook, those are okay, and you can use those to stay in contact. But you just got to be careful that it's appropriate. If somebody is posting something about their personal life, you have to evaluate, do I know this person well enough to comment on something about their personal life? Likewise, if you have people in your network that are following you on social media, make sure that what you are posting paints you in a good light. You don't want to post something that's going to rub somebody the wrong way. Just another reason to really keep your social media profiles as clean as possible. If you are prone to posting things that are maybe a little risky, then you want to make sure that people in your professional network don't blend into your social network. I think you want to work hard to keep those two separate. But like I said, I think some of the things you can do on social media is liking people's photographs, commenting, or tagging them, or doing shout outs, I think is a good way to do it too. LinkedIn is the professional network. Many of you are familiar with it. It's a great way to kind of follow what people are doing. If you see somebody in your network post an article, or if they do a status update, like they've changed jobs or they got a promotion or there's an anniversary, when you can like it, you can comment on it. These are just really low hanging fruit, really easy ways to stay connected with people. Meet at events. Hopefully in the future, not too far away future, when we're back to doing events like career fairs, conferences. If you're planning to go, reach out to your network to see if anybody else is going, and then make a plan to connect with them. Face-to-face connection goes a really long way. So again, if you know somebody's going to an event and it's somebody that you want to add to your network at a certain point, maybe you could plan to go to that same event. And like Jeremy said, the Career Center, we will host those events this semester and next. So those are opportunities for you to connect with alums, but also fellow students. Career conversations, as Jeremy mentioned, these are what we know as informational interviews. These are good opportunities to keep it going, to keep that relationship going with them, learning about what people are up to, and Jeremy kind of explained how you can use those. And then direct updates. So not using any social media or LinkedIn, but you can email people, you can text, or you can direct message them just to check in to see how they're doing. These also go a long way because they show that you're being very thoughtful. You're just sending an email to somebody to say, hey, just want to check in to see how you're doing. I'm approaching graduation. I'm looking forward to making the transition into my first job. So these can really go a long way to update your network about what you're doing, but they're also, again, good ways to renew that contact with them. Okay, so another chance for you to interact. So thinking about these methods that we talked about, how comfortable do you feel using these? So I want to give you an opportunity to rank these. If you go to the website there, polev.com, mycaris657, you can move these up and down, and we'll get a consensus from the group to see how comfortable you feel. So if you feel really comfortable using social media to maintain your network, then put that at number 1. If you feel that career conversations or informational interviews are something that you don't really know, put that down to the bottom. And again, this will give an aggregate of what everyone is saying. So I'll just give it about 30 seconds for you to do that. Interesting to see social media is firmly at the bottom. Jeremy, what do you think that's from? Is it from people, they're either not comfortable or they just prefer not to use social media?
I think people use, especially college students, social media like TikTok and Instagram and things for not professional. So they're unaware of like how to use it in social media in a professional way. I think there's maybe a distinction in people's minds that social media is more of this outlet, but I don't know.
Yeah, I agree. I think, if you're unsure with social media, then just stay away from it. I think because it can be a little tricky to navigate. So good to see. I think there's some good instincts there. So meeting at events, which is great. I think, we all have great, we all have a certain set of people skills. Some are better than others, but I do think that if you can have a face-to-face interaction with somebody, so even if it's a career fair, or like I say, if it's a conference, people really remember you. They remember those engagements, so they can go a long way. Okay. All right. So leveraging your network. So what does it mean to leverage your network? When we say this word leverage, what does that mean? So this is another opportunity to hear from you. Before I share some ideas or some ways that you can leverage your network, you tell me. So students in the session, go to the same website and you can write something in. So and it'll come up on the screen. But we'd love to hear, maybe to see how many of these you can match to the ones that I'm about to show you. So don't be shy. Just, when you think of leveraging your network, what's an example of that? Maybe one that you have done, or maybe the one that you've heard of. Asking for a referral, for sure. Yep, that's probably one of the most common ones we hear about. Yep, asking for just advice or support. Great answer. Yep. Mm-hmm. Good to see somebody mentioning professors. I think faculty are sometimes the underutilized asset in your network. Yep. All right, just for time, I'm going to move on, but those are all right. Getting references. Yep, all of those are correct. So let me share some other ones. So I think this was one of the first ones that came up, but yeah, asking for a referral. Some companies, especially large companies, I think of Google as the most famous employee. If you are applying for a role there and you have an internal reference, they can give you a special link that you would use to apply, so that when you go into the applicant tracking system, it tags you or tags the employee, so that HR knows that it was an internal referral. Usually for some companies that gets you something. Maybe it gets you an automatic phone screen. It does depend. It doesn't obviously get you the job, but it gets you maybe an advantage over everyone else. And for some companies, there's a financial incentive for the employee. So if you know somebody at Google and they give you that link and you eventually get hired, that employee will get money from Google. And depending on the industry, it can be quite a lot of money. So there's companies encourage their employees to refer their networks. So if you know somebody at these companies, again, you should reach out to people to get a referral. Even if there's not a program like that, just an email to the hiring manager or an email to the recruiter on your behalf can really go a long way. So when you start applying for a role, look at your network, see who you know, and reach out to those people. Ideally, before you apply, to kind of give them a heads up. You can say, hey, I've seen this role, I'm going to apply. Would you mind sending an email to the recruiter on my behalf? Doing a phone or video call with your contact in your organization to learn about application advice is another way. So, the person you could reach out and say, hey, I want to apply for this role, but I want to make a strong application. Can we get on a 20-minute call? You can help me figure out, what should I focus on? What should I prioritize? What does your company look for in an applicant? So that way you're using your network to put together the strongest application that you can. You can also ask your network or somebody in the company to connect you with the recruiter for the role or the hiring manager. That's a way of being more than just a resume in a pile. If you can get to the recruiter or get to the hiring manager, I think that really goes a long way too. Somebody who works at that company can then make that connection, and like I say, you can. It's a huge advantage if you can talk to the person who's hiring, so you can be more than just a resume. Another way is just to let your network know that you're looking for opportunities. You could either just send out an email to everyone just to say, hey, I'm looking for opportunities in this field. Here, I've attached my resume. If you know of anything, please let me know. One way that your network can really help you in this way is that they may send roles to you that you may not have found otherwise, or that you may not be looking for. So if your network is on the lookout for roles for you, increases your chance of finding something that you may not have found otherwise. And there's even, I think on LinkedIn, you can update your status to be looking for work. I think there's the filter you can add to your profile picture to tell people that you're looking for work. And then, like we said, going to events is really important. So connecting with company reps at career fairs is really important. We'll be doing around 13 career fairs this fall. And they're great opportunities to get to know recruiters and to get to know people who work on the team. Getting to know them and meeting them is the first step. But then once you apply for the role that you were discussing, it's important that you follow up with them to let them know that you applied. Don't expect them to be looking out for your application. It's always a two-step process. Make the connection, and then after you apply, follow up with an email or a LinkedIn message to tell them that you've applied, so that they know to look out for your application. All right, so that wraps it up for our kind of steps of the networking process, which is the growing your network, maintaining your network, and then leveraging your network. I'd love to be able to answer some questions. Jeremy, I don't know if any more came through the chat.
Yeah, some did. You can stop share. I put them both in if you updated, or if you refresh your screen. I think I threw them all in there.
So you faded out there. Can you say again?
Yeah, I threw them all in there. I think you just have to refresh.
Okay,
something because it should be listed.
Okay.
All right. So just get started.
Do you want to take on the first one?
Yeah, sure. We'll get started on those, and then if we cover them, feel free after to unmute yourself so we can get more questions. But okay, cool. The first one I have here was just how to go about networking when you don't know what career path you want, which is a great question. Usually I really recommend making an appointment with a career counselor, because I still go through a list of things with people with location preferences, public versus private, do some self-assessment stuff. We can still narrow down a bit in terms of you may not have an exact idea, but you probably know more than you think. So the first thing I'd recommend is feel free to make an appointment. I'll go ahead and throw that link, or if Mike, if you want to do that, making an appointment link in the chat. Beyond that, I think it's good to just make a list of things that you're looking for in an opportunity or job, and some skills or things you think you're good at. So that's pretty vague, but you can always start there, right? Of hey, I know I like working with people, or I know I like working with spreadsheets, or I like working on the college campus. I don't know, there's some things you could think of. And then there's skills that either you have or trying to build. So it could be like, feel like I'm really good at writing. I'm trying to build my coding skills, you know, and then those are good things to just start sharing with people in general. And then if they know their area of expertise, you know, or feel better than you, they can start pointing you towards like, oh, this might be a good role for you within my field. So I'd say like kind of come up with those lists and just start talking to people in different fields and start learning maybe where your niche is kind of within that field. So there's still things you can do, but like I said, if you need help with that, I really recommend talking to a career counselor. There's also the career counseling library. You can put that link in the chat too, which can help you with that like self-assessment aspect of narrowing down some of your focuses and your strengths as well. You want to take the next one, Mike?
Sure. Do you have advice for people who generally aren't on social media at all? Yeah, I think again, if you're concerned about how to navigate those two, then stay away from social media. You know, don't be forced to be on social media to do networking if you don't need to. That's kind of what LinkedIn is a good plan B. It's not a social media. It's not for social networking. It's professional networking. So it's limited to what you can do in a good way. So I think if you are, you know, if you're kind of averse to social media, go to LinkedIn. It's a good way to make connections with people. And then I think when you're on LinkedIn, you know, it's on the level. You know, there's less chance of you, you know, saying something controversial or somebody else. So using LinkedIn, I think, is a good way. But if you just don't, you know, if you're not comfortable with social media, I would just say stay away from it.
Okay, and I threw in the career counseling link that can help you kind of like identify stuff. Just separate. So we're the career center, do a lot of practical application and stuff. We still do like little self-assessments, but their main role is to provide these larger self-assessments for students. Recommended limit to how many experiences we should have on LinkedIn. I think this was you, Justin. Should our LinkedIn's be tailored towards the industry? Yeah, so recommend LinkedIn's gonna cut off after a while anyway. You know what I mean? Like it'll like start listing ones and then it'll be like view more. So I tend to tell people, especially early on, I usually put everything there. What I usually do though is sometimes I know it'll also cut off individual ones. So I don't necessarily put a laundry list of stuff. I make sure you can usually see the top like few bullets or like top few descriptions or whatever. So I tend to put everything on there because like if people want to keep looking, they can. But then within the individual entries, I make sure like my top 2 or 3 bullets are the most robust or best descriptions, you know, because I know those individual entries are going to get cut off. But in terms of overall, I kind of just throw everything on there, especially now I'm starting off. You never know what someone might be interested in. And so I would throw everything on there. And then in terms of tailoring, I think LinkedIn's can tend to be more broad. What you could do though is within your tagline at the top, or like in your about me section, if you are actively looking by some industry, you kind of indicate that within your like tagline or that like summary section at the top. That's where I would do that. But I don't think you have to like go in and completely tailor every time like you might with a resume, right? I think those descriptions can be kind of general.
Yeah, I would just add to that. Something I tell students, especially the engineering students, if you have technical, you know, technical projects, LinkedIn has a project section, but it's really far down. So I usually tell students, format your projects into the experience section, because that's what it is for you. Your projects are your experience. So just put them in so that when a recruiter goes to your LinkedIn page and they want to see what technical experience you have, they'll see your projects in that main page. But again, you know, happy to talk about that on an appointment if you want some support. Do you have any advice on how to get a referral from networking via LinkedIn? Kind of mentioned this, but you know, an email, a direct email, I think is a good way to go. It always, like I said earlier, it's always stronger if it comes on the back of some kind of engagement. I have had students do like an informational interview, and they mentioned, hey, if I find any roles at your company, would you mind putting a word in for me? So you can kind of set that up in advance. Is always a way to, so that when you do make the ask, it's not coming out of nowhere. You've kind of already established that they're okay doing that. So when you make the ask, it's something that is not a surprise to them.
And I think it's Alex there had like quite a few questions around how like social media, like Facebook and LinkedIn, so kind of try to address them. In one, I don't think, yeah, you had mentioned kind of on Facebook, basically having like different things. I don't have to like separate stuff on Facebook. I think Facebook you can keep more like for fun, you know, like not like necessarily as professional. Some people use it unless you want to make like your own page, right? Like a company or something. But LinkedIn, I think of as a little distinctly more of like professional social media. So I think there was a question around like, do you need to separate right out friends and family on Facebook from like other professional contexts? I don't think that's necessarily the case. I think it's just more of LinkedIn is seen, and that's what Mike was saying too earlier. Like LinkedIn, you can think of, you kind of understand what's going on there. It's supposed to be more of this like professional updates of what's happening and like your online resume and networking more through work. So I would just kind of keep those a little bit separate, but Facebook, I wouldn't worry too much about like needing to separate types of people or something. You just might be more aware of maybe not like, you know, accepting everyone's friend request on Facebook that you don't know in a more friendly manner. Maybe that is more where you're, as a professional, you are kind of doing on LinkedIn. So meaning, I don't think you need to separate within like Facebook and stuff, but maybe you just are more careful who you allow. And then in terms of how much to post and be active on LinkedIn, it's really up to you. You're probably really busy right now. I didn't really get super active until like the end of grad school in my professional career. We like took a class where they forced us to be more active on LinkedIn, basically. So it's kind of up to you, but similar to, you know, your social media where you might update people on different milestones. I think the milestones is a great place to start. Like, you know, if you just finished a school year, or you got a new job, or you just started doing well in these classes, like that's a good place to start, is updating people on milestones that you're hitting, maybe like academically, professionally, maybe you got a new research opportunity, something like that. I think that's a great place to start, is just updating your network on those. And then you can kind of choose how much time you want to spend, you know, like Mike said, commenting on other people's, liking and seeing kind of their updates. But I would just start with kind of those big overarching ones that you kind of want to share with your network in general. Hopefully that's somewhat helpful.
Yeah. I was thinking like an example of where like this, or like on social media, could be beneficial. Like if you're working at a company and you become friendly with a colleague, and you follow each other on Instagram, and then, you know, maybe you leave and then that person leaves and they go to a different company, and then you want to come back, you know what I mean? So that person is now a key asset for you, and you follow them on social media. So, liking photographs and making comments is a way that you can stay engaged with them. Really good question. What's the balance between authentic and professionalism? It's a good question. It's not an easy question. I think that when it comes to professionalism, err on the side of caution. I think if you're unsure how something is going to land, don't post it. I sometimes see people on LinkedIn, or especially on social media, they'll make risky statements or risky posts, and really if you know that it's going to turn some people away, then don't post that. I always find it's good to be a cheerleader. If you want to be a cheerleader on social media, be a cheerleader, especially on LinkedIn. Like Jeremy said, when people share milestones, like they got a new job or they've hit an anniversary, or I think LinkedIn even tells you it's their birthday, be like, hey, congratulations, or happy birthday, or this is so awesome, or even with a comment or a like. Those are really easy ones. There's no controversy there. Someone's celebrating something and you're jumping on the bandwagon celebrating them too. So that's an easy way, and it's authentic too, right? Of course, if someone's having it's their birthday, of course you want to wish them happy birthday. But I think as you go through your career, you'll get a sense of what professionalism is. And definitely, I think, like I said, if you're unsure, err on the side of caution. Just don't post something, or don't say anything, or don't like anything, just to be safe.
It also depends, on the industry you're in, as Mike would know. Like, and we're constantly, Mike and I are going through it now. Workplaces are having a lot of conversations around what professionalism is, right? Is it these like kind of white professionally like standards of beauty and acting and stuff that have historically maybe left some people out? So no, this is like a very complex topic. That's why it's a great question. And sometimes based on the industry you're in, you may have to like make a decision for yourself, like, right, like how much am I going to show up authentic versus, kind of maybe try to blend in and see the norms first and stuff. That's a great question. I think we ask that a lot as just professionals. I ask myself that all the time. Like, okay, how much am I showing up my authentic self? We literally just had a campus survey where they emailed and asked staff that. I answered that today. Like, do you feel like you can show up as your authentic self to work or whatever? And I was like, oh, that's a good question. So it's a great question. You'll encounter it a lot in your career. Someone asked to kind of a specific one, but basically they're interested in working for a company and asking if they should cold email someone that's kind of like higher up in the company, or maybe someone lower on, or like if they have no mutual contacts, how should they navigate that? So definitely you can just reach out. Sometimes I try using the LinkedIn See Alumni feature and see if there is any alum that works at that company. So I'll throw that in the chat one more time. But basically you can go on there. It's just, you can look through the alumni listed and you can look by company. So you can see if there's anyone that's an alumni at that company and try to reach out, because at least you have that in common. In terms of whether or not to reach out to like the higher up versus the lower person, again, I do it whoever I feel like there's more perceived connection. If like the lower person seems maybe they're like a little closer to you, like an age and experience or something, you may have more connection and maybe they're, you know, good. If the other, but if the person really high up like still has done a lot of things in their career you're really interested in, I'm not telling you not to engage with them. So I usually kind of try to read it and be like, okay, who do I feel like I would, you know, have a lot in common with or have something to talk about, and kind of reach out to them. But you could do both, you know. But yeah, it's a good question. I know I get that a lot of like who to reach out to, because that's kind of an intangible one too, right? It's like, who do you feel more drawn to? It's like, I don't know, like neither. But yeah, sometimes I just kind of try to read it. I don't know if you have any advice too on that, Mike.
Yeah, and I would have said the same thing. If you can, which I know the question is saying if you can't, but if you can, see if you can get a mutual connection to introduce you, because that is like somebody opening the front door for you to meet that person. In the cases where it is a cold email, like Jeremy said, a cold email is fine, but try and establish some kind of connection. Like maybe it's an alum, like, hey, you know, I'm a current student, I see you're an alum, go Bears. Or, you know, if maybe somebody was in the same fraternity as you, or, you know, like Jeremy said, if someone's like similar in age or, you know, background, I think if they see some kind of similarity, they're more willing to like, hey, this person is kind of like me, I'm going to give them a helping hand. That's kind of the second part. I would say the ultimate one is getting an introduction, I think is the top way.
I mainly see two more. I'll hit on the one that was in the chat, and then Mike, you can do if you want the career that overlaps multiple fields. But there's one in the chat was like adding random people on LinkedIn. I'm just gonna hit this as low hanging fruit. I don't, it's kind of up to you. I usually just, everyone has to create their own boundaries, but to me, it has to like make sense. If they are like random, quote unquote, it has to be like, I had someone add me that's like a counselor at an Oakland high school and has a similar degree to me. And so I was like, okay, we have enough in common. We both work in the Bay Area doing some sort of counseling. I was like, oh, and I might be interested in what they do. But I don't just accept, like if like a person just reaches out to me that I'm like, I have no idea why they are, you know, and I don't see any perceived, again, connection, then I'm kind of like, what? So I decline. So you can come up with your own strategy. Maybe you're just trying to build your network so you're more loose with that. But I tend to do people that are like, make sense for me, that maybe have similar professional goals or something, if I don't know them at all. If I know them, obviously it makes sense. But if I don't know them, I tend to want there to be some sort of like commonality or kind of reason. But that's my own personal preference.
Yeah, I'm the same. I'm pretty protective of my network. So I don't, you know, if somebody just like reaches out and gives me the standard, you know, the default, hey, let's connect, and I have no idea who they are, I actually won't accept that connection. I prefer some kind of message, especially if I don't know you, like, why are you reaching out? You know, like, or maybe if we do have a mutual connection, if they name that person, it's helpful. But I'm pretty protective over my network, so I really want to make sure that who's there is, you know, because this may be a network that I need to utilize later, so I want to make sure I know everyone in that network. So yeah, the question, what if you want a career that overlaps multiple fields? You know, I think this just means, you know, more, you know, casting the net wider when you're doing your networking. I think it could be overwhelming though, because now all of a sudden you have so many different people in different fields. So all the more reason to do, like I said, that the strategizing. If you think of these different fields, what are the roles in those fields that you are interested in, and what are the people occupying those roles? And those are the people that you want to connect with. Now, because it's different fields, you know, the roles are going to be very different, but that's a good thing. Don't shy away from this because it's intimidating. You know, the kind of have a strengths-based approach, which is like these are more people that I can connect with, and also more roles I can be exposed to, and more companies I can be exposed to. So having a broader view is actually, it can be a benefit later on.
I think we covered all the ones we got, and I know we're almost at time. I wanted to see if anyone had Any kind of final questions before we wrap up? I guess, Erica, I believe you're raising your hand. Feel free to ask.
Yeah, I'd love to know when people are connecting with you, in your experience, what makes them the most memorable, or what makes you more inclined to respond to them that's like unique from everyone else?
Great question.
Yeah, I can start with this because I just had people reach out to me from my grad program. I think probably the professor must have done something, and then because I got a bunch of invites from people currently in my grad program. I have a master's in counseling, by the way. But a couple of people reached out and were kind of like, do you know people like in the Bay? Can you help me get a job? And I got really turned off by that, and I did not accept the request because it was just a little weird. And then that's what people feel weird about networking, right? They feel like they're making this ask, and that's what we're kind of trying to lead to you with a career conversation. You don't need to feel that way because you don't have to approach networking that way, right? You can approach networking as a like, hey, I'm trying to meet people and learn and share with people that have commonality. So I feel like when I feel like that's the motivation behind it, when someone like sincerely is interested in the work I do and wants to like share ideas and use me as like another professional, they don't have to put me on a pedestal or anything. So as a student, you have to do that, but just kind of like treating yourself like a professional, connecting with another professional and like showing interest and like caring about what they do and stuff. So if that's indicated at all, then I love talking to people about like what they're interested in and what work I'm doing and stuff. So again, if that goes well, you can always follow up with, great, if there's any specific opportunities, like please let me know. But I think leading with that, right, can feel a little weird. So we're not saying not to do that, just not to do that kind of immediately. So I think it's, like I said, the things that stand out are people that kind of reach out and I feel like they actually care about what I do and like want to hear about me.
Yeah, for me, it's when it's almost like a cover letter. When I know that it's tailored for me, then that really stands out. So if somebody, like I said, if they want to connect on LinkedIn and they put in the message like, hey Mike, I saw you just started at the Career Center. Congrats. How's it going? Can we connect? And like that's an immediate yes from me. Like you've looked on my profile, you've seen that I made a career transition, and you've referenced that when we were meeting, or or like, hey, it was great meeting you at that networking event. You really gave me some good advice. Or again, something where I know this person was really thoughtful when they're reaching out to me. And same as Jeremy, if you just lead with the ask of like, hey, you don't know me, but do you think you could help me get a job kind of thing? It's like, it does really kind of turn me off. So that's why I always say, lay the foundation first, grow your network, so that when you do need to leverage it, it's blossomed, it's already fertile, rather than trying to do it retroactively. It feels a little icky to do that.
Hey, thanks, Erica. All right, I think we're at time. I guess I'll pass it over back to boss man Mike to close us out.
Yeah, thanks everyone. Some really great questions. We'll send the deck out to everyone who registered, right? Jeremy, that's probably the best way for us to do that. We can just email.
Yeah, we can email it out. I'll throw it in the chat really quick. But we'll send a follow-up email just in case. Let me just copy. I'm throwing it in.
And then the recording will be on the YouTube channel. And then lastly, book an appointment with the Career Center. I think we're there to help you with anything we've covered today, but there's a whole host of other things that we can help you with, especially as we come into the fall when it gets like the busy season. So please use us. We see students who utilize the Career Center early on in their college career see success later on. So please do that.
Sure. All right. Thank you, everyone. Have a great rest of your day. Have a good long weekend.
All right. Okay. Bye.